The Paranormal Podcast is brought to you by Gaia. The 17th annual Conscious Life Expo will be available via live stream from February 22nd through the 25th, but that special offer is only available to Gaia annual members. To become one today, head on over to gaia.com/Jim and select the annual plan. Thanks, Gaia.
This is the Paranormal Podcast with Jim Harold.
Welcome to the Paranormal Podcast. I am Jim Harold and so glad to be with you today. And we have a great show on tap. We're going to be speaking with someone we've known a long time and who's been in the paranormal world for quite a while, even though he's a young man, and really is one of the foremost people, I think, in the field. We're talking about Greg Newkirk. We're going to talk about his new documentary series, Hellier. It is a hit and very well done, I might add. First of all, before we get to that, I would like to ask you, we've restarted our email weekly updates that we used to do. We kind of trashed the whole list. We wanted to start fresh. We did that, and then for a while I was just relying on social media, and I said, this doesn't work because you don't see half of the posts. So we want to keep you up to date on all the free shows, on all the plus shows, any appearances, anything going on. So if you go over to jimharold.com, that's jimharold.com, you can sign up for our email newsletter. It is now weekly, and it is called Harold's Happenings, and it's exactly $0. So I hope that you will do that. Now we're going to talk to Greg about Hellier, this documentary series about high strangeness in Appalachia. My family is originally from West Virginia, so I love the idea of this, of that part of the world. And Greg is so accomplished despite being a young man. He's a writer, a museum director, and I love how it says here on his website at weirdhq.com, a somewhat rugged paranormal adventurer, now documentarian. I know he did a Bigfoot movie a few years back, but now he has Hellier, and again, a smash hit. Can't wait to talk about it. Greg, welcome to the program today.
Oh, fantastic to be here, Jim. Thanks for having me.
So for those who have not heard of it, and I know that there's a big buzz on the net about this, so probably a lot of our people have, explained to us what Hellier is.
Well, Hellier is a 5-part documentary series about strangeness in the Appalachian Mountains, about unsolved mysteries, and about goblins, as strange as that might sound.
Oh my goodness. Now, this started a few years back for you, if I'm not mistaken. You had gotten some emails, and that's how all this got going.
Yeah, about 7 years ago, I was living in Canada. I was going through Canadian immigration. My wife, Dana's Canadian, and I got an email from this guy, and the subject line was something to the effect of urgent, need help, please respond. And the weird thing was it came to an email address that I didn't use anymore. It was from my old ghost hunting team when I was just a teenager. We didn't really get emails there. And so I was immediately intrigued as to what this might be, because the team had been defunct for years. And reading it, it was this guy who said his name was David. And he said that he was having, his family was being assaulted by little creatures that he believed were coming out of a mine shaft on the edge of his property. And he said, he gave a description of them. They looked a bit like short, traditionally what you would think of as a gray alien. And they were tapping on his children's windows at night. They were rummaging through his garage, his shed, and basically terrifying his family. And he wanted help with the situation and said that a mutual friend had told him I was, quote unquote, well equipped to handle situations like that, which, by the way, not true. Never hunted a goblin before. Didn't know traditional goblin hunting protocol. And like I said, the email address was, anyone who would have seen the website, which was still up at that time, they would have just seen a bunch of teenagers holding medieval weapons. It did not look like we were a crack team.
Now, when you get something like that, and I get a lot of inquiries for my campfire show, how do you separate the wheat from the chaff? What made you decide this was something worth pursuing? Something that had some real meat on the bone to it?
Well, I typically try and respond to every email that I get. I try and respond to every weird story that I get, because you never know. Everyone's viewing the world through their own lens, so sometimes what they think is a goblin might be something else. But I always have a healthy level of skepticism about this type of stuff. And this one, because of where it came, because it just sounded too good to be true, I did have a lot of skepticism about it. But I responded and I said, well, listen, that's really intriguing. I'd love to help you, but you need to give me more details. Anything that you can, just kind of nicely saying, you got to give me some proof that you're for real, man. And a few weeks later, he did. He sent photographs that had three-toed footprints in them. He sent photographs that he claimed to have the creatures in them. The photographs of the creatures were very stereotypical paranormal photo, where they're just blurry and out of focus.
Right.
But the footprints were stunning. I don't know much about footprints, so I sent them to friends. Especially Bigfoot hunters who I had met through my travels at that point. And they were especially interested because the footprints actually had dermal ridges on them, which are like fingerprints for your foot. And they're very, very hard to fake. So once I got those, I was pretty all in, despite how over the top the story was.
Now, did you start to go, and when did you decide to go down there and start investigating it, or start really pursuing it? How did that happen?
So these emails, the original emails, came in 2012, and I was going through Canadian immigration, so I couldn't leave the country. That's one of the things I don't think a lot of people realize. It doesn't matter whether you're in the U.S. or Canada. Once you start an immigration process, you're not normally allowed to leave the country, or you're not let back in until that's complete. And since I was trying to get Canadian residency, I wasn't allowed to leave. So I couldn't in 2012 go and check this out. And I didn't know anything about Kentucky. I'd never been to Kentucky before. This guy, the place that this was all happening was in this tiny town called Hellier. And I thought, well, maybe I'll get some friends who I trust to go and check it out. But it never even got to that point, because this guy just dropped off the map. After he had sent the last batch of photos, which he sent when he said he was going back home to get a bunch of his family's stuff with his brother-in-law, because they had fled the house. Like, it had taken too long and they didn't want anything to do with the place. He never sent me another email. So it wasn't until 2015 that we actually stepped foot in Hellier for the first time. In a weird string of events, Dana and I ended up getting jobs in Cincinnati, and they were just too good to say no to. So we ended up flipping. I stopped my Canadian immigration. Dana started her U.S. immigration. It's funny how that works. And since we realized we worked there for a year, and then we were like, you know what? We're only like 2.5 hours from that place where that weird guy emailed us and sent us those photographs. Like, let's just drive out. So on the weekend, after we got a set of wheels, we just drove to Hellier. And we just, as crazy as it sounds, took the photographs and just started asking around and saying, does anybody know this guy David? Have you ever seen any footprints like this? And we were getting stories from all kinds of people. We just kind of posted up at this gas station in the middle of town, which served as their post office, their pizza restaurant, their grocery store. It was the hub. And any paranormal investigator knows that's where you go. You go to the local diner where all the locals hang out, and you start asking for stories. And within 20, 30 minutes of being there were 24 people who had crowded around, and they were talking about UFOs that had hovered over the town. They were talking about, finding weird three-toed tracks, all kinds of stuff. And we thought, okay, this is the place. We've got to come back. And then, as happens, life just kind of got in the way, and we were working 14-hour days for a tech startup. And then we started doing some shows like Finding Bigfoot, and we just never went back. And then Carl Pfeiffer, the director of the documentary, was 2017. He had a crazy synchronicity where he was listening to me talk about the case on a show that was just an old show. And as he was listening and live tweeting it, our Week in Weird website has it's got like a automated churn app so that it takes old articles from way before and just gives them a little new life. And it popped up the one about the Kentucky Goblins out of like 1,700 posts. And he said, oh, this means something. We need to go do this. And so Carl was really the impetus to getting there and actually doing this documentary.
And that synchronistic piece, that's kind of interesting because it seems like when people look into this kind of stuff, there are eerie and strange synchronicities. Not only with this, but have you found that to be the case? Sometimes they can be good, maybe sometimes not so good, like equipment not working and things like that. Does that map to your experience?
Oh, absolutely. I think the strangest cases that we've been on are the ones where everything happens because of what feels like a coincidence at the time. But when you really start paying attention to these things, you realize they're synchronistic. There's something different going on. And my wife, Dana, she swears by them. And she says, those are guideposts. Those are signposts. It's saying you're on the right path. You're doing the right thing, or it's meant to nudge you to do the right thing. So the craziest investigations I've ever been on have only gotten to some kind of an endpoint because of strange synchronicities.
Now, it's a case where this show is heard, and Carl hears it and contacts you about it. And I had seen in the show where you guys had known each other from some conferences and so forth. Mm-hmm. But you could have said, well, I don't really know that this is the right project. Why don't we work on something else? Why did you say, yeah, this is the right thing to work on? Why?
I did say that.
Okay. Oh, okay. Go ahead. Take us through that.
I did. I said, I was like, man, I don't know. We can't find this guy, David. I just don't know. Because one of the things that I always talk about, and some of my friends make fun of me about it, is I say, like, I only do sure things, which sounds insane when you're talking about the paranormal. So if I'm going to take up a project, I want it to be a sure thing. And what I mean by that is I want to at least be able to reasonably realize the branching paths that'll take. So if it's some kind of a weird experiment, I want to know, okay, it's going to end this way, or this way, and I can plan for it, and I can still make it something that people care about, regardless of how it's going to end up. This was not one of those cases. There was no way to shape this story into something where we could understand what the outcome was reasonably going to be. And so because of that, I was nervous about it because I didn't want to go to this town and then have it just be dead ends and have absolutely nothing happen. Because then, it's not like we're a production company that has a huge budget. We don't have any money.
I can relate.
Yeah, you know what it's like, when you're an independent production and you're doing it because of pure passion. Sometimes it's hard to take those risks. Some risks are easier. But when it comes to, budget and spending money, that can be a tough risk. And so, we have a stockpile of experiments and ideas that we've been doing for years. And, I was suggesting some of those to Carl. But Carl, to his credit, he said, we're supposed to do this. He had so many synchronicities that were pushing him. And he said, I think this is supposed to happen. We're supposed to go do this. I feel like we're being called to go and do this. You guys were called. My camera was called. Let's make it happen. And so I trusted him, and I said, let's go.
Well, it's a fascinating story. We're going to talk more about what happened once taping ensued. Our guest is Greg Newkirk. He is one of the brains behind the new 5-part documentary series Hellier, and we'll be back right after this. The Paranormal Podcast is brought to you by Gaia, the streaming TV service dedicated to empowering the evolution of consciousness. I've been telling you how Gaia just got a whole lot better this year as we've been talking about Gaia, but I wasn't kidding. I was absolutely serious. Now get ready for this. The 17th annual Conscious Life Expo will now be available live stream, all thanks to Gaia. Now, in addition to all of the great new shows Gaia has been releasing, and I've been telling you about this year, they have stepped up their game to bring you some of your favorite speakers live. Names like Eric Von Daniken, Billy Carson, Jason Silva, Deborah King, and Teal Swan. You'll be able to watch live the Ancient Astronauts panel led by Jimmy Church. He's going to mine this great wisdom to determine, did aliens from ancient times influence the development of civilization and mankind? Or the Paranormal panel led by George Norrie. They both sound fascinating to me. All the great keynotes, workshops, and presentations will be available to watch live or on demand starting this weekend, February 22nd through the 25th. Now, this special offer is only available to Gaia annual members. Very important to note that. So, to become a Gaia annual member, head on over to Gaia.com/Jim. That's Gaia.com/Jim and select the annual plan. Remember to live stream the 17th annual Consciousness Life Expo and get unlimited replays from the weekend plus a full year of Gaia. Head on over to Gaia.com/Jim. That's Gaia.com/Jim and select the annual plan. And that's a great way you can say thank you. We, in the lifetime of the programs in the last 14 years, have really never had anybody support us to the level that Gaia has. Just being honest. I mean, they have been there and supporting us for over 2 years now, and it's just been a great partnership. So I appreciate them. I hope you appreciate them, and it's a win-win. You get all this great content, not only the bank of previous shows, but all this new live streaming capability. It is so neat if you are an annual member. I know that you will enjoy the best of the Consciousness Life Expo, and I can't wait to check it out. So go over to Gaia.com/Jim today. That's Gaia.com/Jim. Thanks, Gaia. We're back on the Paranormal Podcast. Our guest is Greg Newkirk. We're talking about his 5-part cinematic documentary series. It's called Hellier, and it's all about Kentucky goblins and high strangeness. And we're certainly looking forward to talking more about it with Greg. Greg, I can kind of picture, because as I said in the intro, my family was from small town Appalachia, so I had a lot of experience of going down there and visiting and all of that. And I really could almost see the place when you talked about it's their post office, it's their gas station, it's their pizza place. It's like, I know how that goes. And I could imagine the people, gathering around. I could see guys like in camouflage caps and stuff like that. I mean, I'm just picturing it. Yeah. But I will say this. Now, I love the people of Appalachia. They're some of the nicest people ever. Your car breaks down or something. They will help you in a second. Of course, if they watch strangers, I'll tell you that. I know that for sure too. But the point is, and having family as you have in Appalachia or had in Appalachia, somebody will say, well, he's so-and-so's family, he's okay. Right. But anyway, but the point is that they do like to tell tales. Now a lot of them are true, and then maybe sometimes there's a few fish tales in there. Yeah. Now, how did you, going back to that first time when you went to that gas station, were you kind of mentally weeding them out? Did you feel that they were being forthright with you? What were your thoughts on that? How did you separate the wheat from the chaff? Well,
The thing that was really great is being able to actually have some evidence of stuff to show these people and see how similar their stories were to what we were looking at. Because one of the things that I've noticed, and I'm sure you've noticed, anyone who's been in the paranormal field for long enough, they start to notice crossover.
Yep.
And it's strange because Bigfoot hunters don't really talk to UFO investigators, and UFO investigators don't talk to ghost hunters, and none of them talk to psychics. And if they did, I think they would realize they're all probably investigating the same thing, or at least elements of the same thing a lot of the times. So once you've done it long enough and you've explored enough of these avenues, you start to see that. And that's one of the first things we started to notice about the case. The reason we even started referring to them as goblins wasn't because of what David had said. He never called them goblins. It sounded so much similar to the Hopkinsville goblins case back in the 50s that happened over in Western Kentucky. Everything from the farmhouse being quote unquote attacked by these creatures to even how they looked, how the family responded to them, the fact that it was in Kentucky. It just sounded so similar that we just started looking for similarities in people's stories, any elements that seemed to match, anything that dovetailed together perfectly. And that's how we started to realize it wasn't just Hellier. One of the things I should stress is Hellier is a prologue to a much bigger investigation. Hellier just seemed like the center point of what got us interested in this. The more we look all the way up the Appalachians, even throughout the Mammoth Cave system, there are all of these spots where there's these stories that have been told for hundreds of years by locals. And they differ sometimes in a few aspects, but they're all relatively the same. And these people have been experiencing the same type of phenomenon. They've just given it different names. So the more we talk to these people in town, they would say, well, my grandparents used to talk about the holler goblins. Or, my grandmother told me if I ever see what looks like children, but not really children walking into the forest, don't follow them because they're dangerous. So lots of stories like that, different names, miners talking about Tommy knockers, all this different stuff. They all just dovetail together so perfectly. And then we started to look at maps and realize, wow, these are all happening around the Mammoth Cave system, which is the largest cave system in the world. And we could sit there and plot these things out. And we realized at that point, it's not just Hellier. It's all over the Appalachians. So when we were in town, we were just looking for people that had stories that were close enough to David's, just to see, could this have happened here? And have things like this been happening here? Can we establish a pattern? That's the biggest thing to us. If we can establish a pattern, we can reasonably predict where these things are happening.
Now, and I think that what I'm about to talk to you now is a bit of a challenge for anyone wanting to make a film or make video in the paranormal world these days. People's thresholds have gone up for what they expect. Right. So, for example, when I was a kid, I used to watch In Search Of, and then a little later Unsolved Mysteries, and thought it was the spookiest thing ever. Right. Now, I love those shows. I mean, that's my wheelhouse, man. If somebody would do a new In Search Of or something in the right way, and I'm excited to see what they do with Unsolved Mysteries, but they'll probably ruin it. But the point is, I love those kind of shows. I'm probably less of a fan of with the EMF meters and chasing around and those kind of things. I'm not as much a fan of those shows. Honestly, just being honest, we've had many of those people on the shows. We will continue to do that because that's, listeners love to hear that, and that's fine. But that's just my personal bias. But the thing is, how do you do in this day and age, a documentary like this, maintain integrity, and short of showing a goblin, interviewing a goblin in 4K, short of that, how do you make it entertaining, informational, exciting? How did you guys meet that challenge?
That's a huge challenge. I'm a fan of paranormal television to a point. I never take it as gospel. I think it's entertainment. And, I pop up on those shows. I do guest spots on those shows. They are what they are. They're great. I have a lot of friends that do them, but they have a very established protocol. If you watch any paranormal show, it's actually really funny because my wife Dana was talking to our friend John Tenney.
Yeah, sure.
Said, do you want to see the first paranormal show that was ever made? And he went back to an episode of In Search Of that featured Hans Holzer and a psychic investigating a haunted house.
Yeah, I think I remember that one.
I'm sure you do. If you watch that, Jim, you will see it was that episode that laid out the structure of every paranormal television show, even to this day. Every single beat is exactly the same. And people can change it up, and they can do variances on Bigfoot or ghosts or demons or whatever. But they all really follow that same 3-act structure. They have to, because television networks don't want to take a risk. They know what people like. They know they've got all the data. They can tell what people enjoy watching. And that's fine. That's totally cool. But when we are doing something like Hellier, one of the conversations that we had is, how do we keep it honest and still entertaining? Because at the end of the day, it's still a piece of film that we want people to watch, and we want them to have a good time watching, but we don't want to lie to the viewer. And it's actually created something that's really been interesting to watch, because anyone who's seen Hellier or will watch it after listening to this, they'll notice it really is not anything like what they're used to. And for some people, it's been a frustrating experience because they aren't used to seeing the dead ends. And we left all of that in. People can see when we get frustrated. They can see where where a thread doesn't go anywhere. They see where it naturally progresses to, in a way that I think a lot of filmmakers and television producers are very afraid of showing. But it's honest, and that's the thing. I think when people watch it, they can't say anything other than it's honest, because we left so much of that in there. But that's part of it. And I think it hopefully will inspire other people to show what paranormal investigation is actually like on the screen, because we don't really see much of that. And I think that's why it's so jarring to some people who expect it to stick to that 3-act structure. And you expect us at the end of Hellier to, drag a dead goblin body out of a mine. It's just, I don't want to disappoint or spoil anyone. We don't do that. We don't find a dead goblin. What we find is much stranger and more akin to real paranormal investigation, the types of things that paranormal investigators go through. But it's not so easily compartmentalized. And that was a discussion. We all talked about it. We were nervous before we put it out because we didn't know if people were ready for it. Because we talked to producers about Hellier. We talked to producers and networks about it. And some of us turned down very lucrative opportunities to put this out the way that we wanted to, because they wanted to show it differently. And I understand why. But, according to them, people didn't want to see what real paranormal investigation was like. And that made us nervous. But now we're seeing the way people are responding to it. And we realize they're wrong. So it's been great. It's been really interesting to see how it's all played out.
Well, I don't know if I came up with this term or somebody on one of the shows. I mean, after doing 1,700 episodes or whatever I've done, it all runs together. But either I came up with this or somebody on the show came up with it. It's kind of like supernatural fishing. If you go fishing with someone, it's great when you get a bite and you catch a fish. That's a lot of fun. But there's a lot of sitting on the riverbank too.
Yes, for sure. And I think that's where it's useful. That's a great analogy, because it really does feel like fishing. But at the same time, if you're fishing with a few people, you're at least going to get a few good fishing stories while you're telling it. And I think that's key to keeping people interested. You have to at least give them something. One of my favorite things about Hellier has been we gave people enough information that they can go and investigate it themselves. And already, it's been out for almost 3 weeks. Already, there are people who have been building, there's 3 different programmers who have programmed different cipher decoders, because the Secret Cipher of the Euphonauts, an old book by Alan Greenfield, plays a very big part in Hellier. But it's pretty esoteric, and it requires you to do a lot of calculations. There's programmers who are inspired to create programs that automatically run through these cipher values. So there's those people. There's people that are investigating mines. They're sending us stories that they've gathered from all over the country. It's as much a part of the investigation to have put Hellier out as us being in Hellier. And that's the greatest part about it, because people are able to take as much, they're able to investigate it as much as we do. They just have to have the drive to do it.
One of my favorite quotes about this kind of stuff is, and it's probably a misquote, but talking about the work of somebody like John Keel, you noticed them and they noticed that you noticed them. Did you find that was the case as you got into this?
Absolutely. I think even the few of us that were skeptical of that have really come around to the idea that what we were doing in Hellier was part of something bigger. And regardless of what we found or didn't found, something took notice of us doing what we were doing. And I believe we've gotten some nudges. We've gotten some nudges back because of that. There's a specific point in the last episode where I think that's even more palpable for the viewers as well. But I mean, you ask a lot of people who've investigated the paranormal for a while, and they eventually get to that point where it's like, you gaze into the abyss gazes back kind of deal. And you start to realize there's points when things are noticing what you're doing. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I think is up for debate and up for however you decide to process that information and use that information. But yeah, for sure. I think, one of the things we've been talking about since we started Hellier is it feels like we are making it on behalf of the phenomena. So that's a slightly concerning thing to say, but the way that it's panned out, and it's not much of a spoiler to say it, but Hellier ends on a pretty whopping cliffhanger, and that wasn't there to be cute. What happens at the end actually happened, and the case is even crazier now. So it's almost like every time we go somewhere that we are supposed to go, something else, another door unlocks, so to speak. And that's gotten really crazy in the last year.
Do you think there's a trickster element?
Oh, 100%. Absolutely. I think people can decipher that from watching the series. There's elements there that are outright trickster. Which again is another scary thing, because you don't know what threads you should be following. So I think we're just trusting our guts and approaching it trying to stay healthy without going crazy. That's also one of the fears. A lot of paranormal investigators who've gone down this path, they just kind of go nuts, and we're trying not to go crazy.
Well, I don't think there's any danger of that. You seem like you have both feet on the ground. When we get back, we're going to talk more about it. But before we get past the break here, and we'll mention this at the end of the interview as well, how can people find Hellier? Because it's pretty easy. I think everybody's heard of the place where it's at.
Yeah, if you want to check out Hellier, the best place you can go is go to hellier.tv. And from there, you can check it out for free on YouTube, Vimeo, and it's even on Amazon Prime right now.
Well, there you go. See, there's no excuse, as they say. We'll be back with Greg Newkirk, and we'll talk more about Hellier. Hey, everyone. Before we get back to this fascinating edition of the show, I want to tell you about something that I did this last weekend, and I hope that you can check it out. Now, you know how they say everything that is old is new again? Well, that's the case, because last year I had deleted all of my email lists and gotten rid of my email newsletter. And at the time I thought, well, social media is enough and I can tell people about things on the podcast. And then I realized we have so many things to promote, so many different shows, so many different guests. We have books, new initiatives coming up all the time, contests. And there's really no good way to communicate that in a podcast, because the show would just be 20 minutes of promotion. And then there's really no good way to promote it on social media, because, we love to be on Facebook and Twitter and everything, but a lot of those outlets restrict who sees what, or they only see it if you put it up at a certain time. I said there's one sure way to communicate with people, and that's via email. And it is still the case even in 2019. So we deleted out all the old lists, which in a way is kind of good, because that gets rid of people who maybe have lost interest or whatever. And we decide to restart our email newsletter, and we're kind of giving it a refresh. We're calling it Harold's Happenings. It's going to come out every week, every Sunday. And basically it's going to be a listing of all the shows that were on that week, any that, and links to them, so you don't miss the topics. And then also any links to upcoming events like live video on Facebook. I'm doing more of that these years, maybe any meet and greets, for example, I do for the Plus Club. And I have to reiterate, this is absolutely free. This is my email newsletter. You can sign up at jimharold.com. There's a big graphic there. You can't miss it. And you sign up for free, and every week you will get a new newsletter and occasional special updates if something really cool is happening, like I'm going to be on Coast to Coast AM or whatever it might be, or I'm doing a Facebook Live. This is really a way that I know that as long as you open email, you are up to date, and can't rely on social media for that. And I don't want to turn the shows into a plug fest and just have 27 listings of the different things going on that next week. So this is a way to keep the shows on point and keep you informed. So please go over to jimharold.com and sign up for our free new email newsletter. It's called Herald Happenings. It's all at jimharold.com. I hope you'll go there now and sign up right away. It's free. And thanks. We're back on the Paranormal Podcast. Our guest is Greg Newkirk. He is one of the minds behind the new documentary series Hellier, and you can find it pretty much everywhere. And really very exciting. I love, I was telling Greg offline, I love what people like he is doing, people like Seth Breedlove on the video side, and hopefully people like me and many others on the podcasting side. The idea, Greg, that we don't have to ask for permission these days. Certainly if there's opportunity to get it out to a broad audience during an outlet, I think we'll all take the calls. But I think it's great to be able to say, I want to do this, and actually go do it.
I think we're living in a renaissance right now because, even just consumer equipment, we shot Hellier. The budget for Hellier was like $2,500, just like on site. And that's unheard of. That's crazy. And I think that's one of the fun things is it doesn't look like that because the people involved, Carl especially, very talented, made very, very smart decisions about how to shoot the documentary, and did it on the cheap. And we're living in a fantastic time period right now because there really is no excuse. Anyone who wants to create, they have the ability to do so with things like crowdfunding and with things like, we didn't even crowdfund Hellier. We just pooled our money, what we had, and went and did it. So there's no excuse. And anyone who wants to make something can make something. And it's fantastic because I think as television, that whole thing gets very murky and the future is very unclear for television. You're seeing things like being able to make projects like Hellier for next to nothing and still make them great and put them out and show the world and actually get opportunities from stuff like that. So I'm loving it. I think that we're in one of the best places for paranormal content we've ever been.
Yeah, there's so much of it. I mean, think about this. In the 70s, there was In Search Of. In the 80s, there was Unsolved Mysteries. Then you had Art Bell coming in with Coast to Coast, but it was really very limited. And of course, there were a ton of great authors, people like Brad Steiger, who, God rest his soul, probably my favorite all-time guest on the Paranormal Podcast. It was just an honor to just talk to the man. He had done so much and seen so much, but it really was limited. And now, there's a wealth of material and different voices. I think it's absolutely fantastic, and salute your role in it. Now, we talked a little about the trickster. Do you think that there might be an element of, in terms of this experience, is there an element of evil, or is it just something we don't understand?
I think that the world is not black and white. And so I try very hard to not see it black and white. I think that's a big problem, frankly, in the paranormal community is we've for too long separated things into, it's either my dearly beloved dead grandmother or it's, Satan's spawn, one of the two. And I think that that's where you get into a lot of trouble. I think that there are gray areas, and I think that what we're doing and what we're investigating in Hellier is a gray area. I think that what we're looking at doesn't typically care. Doesn't really care either way about what we're up to and what we're doing. I think we can get it to notice us and maybe help us once in a while. But I don't think the phenomena has a very vested interest in us. And I don't think it really matters what we're doing. I think what we're doing is we're trying to plot patterns and figure out what it is. But I don't think it has a nefarious purpose. I think sometimes, I'm sure that the deer thinks the lion is evil, but it's just doing what it does to survive. That's
an interesting analogy. I'll give you another analogy. let's say that we could go back in time and we could give an iPhone to a caveman. For him, and I think it was Arthur C. Clarke, technology far enough advanced is indistinguishable from magic.
For sure.
I mean, the caveman would look at that and it's like, I have no clue. Or even somebody in the 17 or 1800s, right?
Yeah.
Do you think that whatever we're chasing, and to me, I named the Paranormal Podcast. For me, paranormal back in 2005 when I started this, that meant all of it. Now people think it means ghosts.
For sure.
And it's like, no, it means all of it. At least to me, that's the way I took it. Like, basically, we keep mentioning it, but In Search Of. Anything you would have seen on In Search Of, you'd hear on the Paranormal Podcast or on Coast to Coast. It's all of it. It's all this high strangeness and weirdness.
That's the way it's supposed to be.
I think so.
Anything other than normal. Yeah, it's not just ghosts, but I think, we can blame popular media for that, I think.
Yeah, but that's just my little pet peeve is people like, oh, you have a ghost show. And it's like, yeah, that's part of it. Part of it. Part of it, not all of it. But anyway, do you think that maybe when we're trying to look at this stuff, are we like the cavemen and cave women that whatever is going on is you just point out it's Aunt Millie or it's a demon from hell? Okay. Is it possible, in your view, that it is so far above us that, life is about striving and trying to learn more and trying to figure things out, and we should do it. We just almost have a duty to do it. But the truth is, we're going to be like that caveman. We're never going to be able to figure it out because it's so far beyond our comprehension that it's just impossible.
There's absolutely elements of that to it. People have been trying to figure out what this stuff is since the dawn of man. But I think the biggest challenge that we have to getting over that and to actually getting somewhere in this field are these self-inflicted barriers that we put up. The idea of going, anything that scares us must be a demon, must be demonic, or anything that's nice to us, it must be a dead relative. I think that those boxes that we put around ourselves and put around the phenomena, whether it's going, UFOs are real, but those guys who believe in Bigfoot, those guys are nuts.
Yeah. That
type of stuff is so unhelpful. And one of the things that Dana and I are always talking about, we run the Traveling Museum of the Paranormal and the Occult. And it's funny because people anticipate coming to the museum exhibitions and walking into the tent and being really scared. And sometimes they are. But what we're really trying to tell people is choose curiosity over fear, because curiosity is a brick wall to any sort of understanding. If we're afraid of something we don't understand, we're never going to learn more about it because we're going to automatically assume things about it. So we're always trying to show people, listen, when we're dealing with hauntings and they're really scary, it's probably because whatever it is frustrated that we're not listening to it. We're not doing something from it. So instead of running away from it, see how you can understand it. And once you understand it, a lot of times that stuff goes away. It just stops. So more than not understanding it, it's more important to not be afraid of it and to broaden your horizons and be willing to investigate things that might seem a little too strange or might not be your wheelhouse, because understanding it is completely out of the question while you're still afraid of it.
Well, now I'm going to go right in the face of that because I have to ask this question. And again, let's not give too much away. We want people to tune in, and it's very accessible, so there's no reason not to. Is there an anecdote from the story that maybe freaked you and your colleagues out? Something you could share with us without giving away a major plot point of the program?
Oh, sure. I mean, and let me preface this by saying it's okay to be scared. It's okay to be scared. It's not okay to put up a boundary because you're scared, because you'll learn more about the world around you if you push past that fear. Everyone's afraid of things they don't understand. There were plenty of times in Hellier that I was very afraid. There were points. One of the things that we do in the series is something that Carl Pfeiffer and Connor Randall developed at the Stanley Hotel. They were resident investigators at the Stanley Hotel for many years. I mean, can you think of a cooler job? Like, that's literally your job, is you just look for ghosts.
That's pretty
in
wild.
one of the most haunted hotels in the world. It's amazing. they developed this really awesome way of using the SB7 spirit box, something that I despised before this experiment, where they adopted a lot of traditional sensory deprivation and parapsychological methods. So what they do is they plug in the spirit box to a set of specific headphones. They're headphones made for drummers, because Connor is a drummer in band The Ghoulies. And they block out like 21 decibels of noise. So they're made for drummers so they can't hear themselves. And then they put a blindfold on and they just start running the spirit box. And what this does is sort of a double blind thing, because people will ask Connor the questions as he's the receiver, so to speak. So he can't hear what's being asked. He can't see what's being asked. He can't read lips. And all he does is repeat the things that he hears out of the spirit box. My view on it is, I think what happens is people eventually, they go into some kind of a weird trance. You can notice they start to rock. Mm-hmm. And it's almost like technologically assisted mediumship is what it seems like they're channeling something. Huh. And I think that the spirit box just becomes a point of keeping their conscious mind busy looking for words, while the subconscious mind starts slipping messages in from the ether. And it's a very spooky thing to watch. Well, the first time I ever saw it live was when we were doing the Hellier shoot. And we're sitting on the porch, and Connor goes in and has one of the best sessions I've seen. And he is legitimately predicting things that are happening to us right there on the porch, like moments before they're happening. And again, he's sensory deprived. He has no idea what's going on, but he's calling out where things are, where noises are coming from. And he starts to give words and phrases that are so bizarre, really strange words that didn't mean much to us at the time, but now carry so much weight. Some intelligence, I'm convinced, some bigger intelligence came through and showed him where we're supposed to go and things we're supposed to look for. Ooh, do you hear that?
Ooh, what is that, a jet?
No, it literally just started lightning and thundering.
Oh, man.
Right here.
You know, do you find, Greg, when you talk about this stuff, weird things start to happen? No.
Oh, gosh, yeah. Yeah. Ooh.
Yikes. Well, see, it just happened right there. And weird things do indeed happen. How did you, I was like, when somebody has a big project, and I think this definitely, would be defined as that. And you've been doing this a lot of times, so you've heard all the theories, you've gotten a lot of different viewpoints. When you came out of the end of this, did it change anything about your thoughts about the supernatural and the paranormal? Yes. Or did it confirm them?
I think it did both. It confirmed a lot of the things that I had already thought that were just sort of gut feelings. Like, oh
like Vincent Price is going to walk in any minute.
That's exactly what it feels like.
You rang.
It came out of nowhere. It confirmed a lot of the stuff that I already thought, and it changed a lot of my opinions on things. It made me believe more in the idea that there can be something bigger that you can get the attention of if you try hard enough, and it might be able to point you towards a direction. It also made me very aware of the fact that it's very easy for people to lose their footing and go absolutely nuts if they get too deep into this type of thing. And I'm really thankful that I have this group of people involved in this project that I trust, you know, my wife and Carl and Connor. And, you know, there's even some new people that have come in as we've continued the case. They're people that I trust and I know will pull me back from over the ledge if I step a bit too far. I think that's the biggest fear I have these days when it comes to the paranormal, is going nuts.
Well, I mean, it's happened. So that is one thing. And yeah, I do. I worry about that too sometimes. I kind of, for me, I've always kind of looked at myself as like, you know, back in the day when you would watch a football game, the broadcasters were mainly non-athletes. And I kind of look at myself like, well, I am a non-athlete, but I'm not a participant per se, although I do believe in this stuff and I believe something's going on and I'm utterly fascinated about it, but I personally have a little bit of distance because I'm not a paranormal investigator and I don't necessarily know one end of an EMF meter from the other. Well, that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but you know what I mean. But sure. The point is I'm not going to be out, in a black shirt doing this. And I think in a way for me that works, and everybody's different. For me that works because I can keep a little arm's length, even though I'm certainly, I think, of the paranormal community, and I'm certainly a believer. I wouldn't say I'm a true believer. I'm kind of in the middle, but I'm a believer that there's definitely something going on. And I definitely believe that it's way weirder than we can even conceptualize. And that's why we enjoy talking to people like Greg Newkirk. Just fascinating and really applaud this latest project. Greg, where can people tune in to Hellier once again? Remind them, please. And also, this is just scratches the surface of everything you do with Planet Weird and Weekend Weird and all of that. So explain to people all the ways they can connect to you, to your work, and to this great documentary.
Yeah, if people want to check out Hellier, it's available for free. You can watch all 5 episodes for free. There's no catch. Go to hellier.tv, and that'll give you a bunch of different avenues to watch. If you want to learn more about what we do with the museum, you can go to paramuseum.com. And if you just want some general information about some of the other projects that we're into, they can always go to weirdhq.com, and that's kind of the top of the umbrella for all of our projects.
Excellent. Our guest has been Greg Newkirk. Greg, congratulations and continued success with Hellier and everything you do.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Jim. This was fantastic.
And thank you for tuning in to the Paranormal Podcast. Always fascinating and great guest, and we're going to keep on doing it. It's only been 14 years. Hopefully we can go at least 14 more. We'll talk to you next time, and have a great week, everybody. Bye-bye. Now for the legal disclaimer. We do not accept money from publishers or content producers in exchange for interviews. However, as with most media outlets, in the majority of cases, we do receive complimentary copies of books and DVDs that we feature on our podcasts. Your purchases of books, DVDs, and other items via our Amazon.com links benefit Jim Harold and JimHarold.com and help us continue our programming. The sponsor messages you hear on the programs are paid endorsements, although we really do like them. For the full disclaimer, go to JimHarold.com, and thanks for listening.